What's up, Brian? You ready?
I am ready. I'm ready. That was
all right. I'm ready too. Welcome everybody to Pop Culture Philosophers. The very first live creator conversation we ever had on this channel was Alex Paknadel, who was coming off of Friendo, and he had GIGA was coming up and some Marvel work for Empire. He's even got more Marvel work since then and more Marvel work to come. He's got work at DC with DC versus Vampires, All Out War. He's got an upcoming Image book that I am supremely excited for, All Against All. Let's go ahead and bring him in, everybody. Give a warm, mighty, hearty station and a pop, pop, boom to Alex Paknadel. What is up, my man?
Station.
Oh, thanks ever so much for finding the time. Yeah, it's evening here in the UK. Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks ever so much for having me back. Hopefully this one, if I was the first one, I hope I'm not the last. So.
Oh, I hope not. No, because we got a show scheduled for Sunday, so you're totally fine. This will not be the first and the last. But if anybody would be our alpha and omega, it would be awesome if it could be you, Alex. So
yes, absolutely.
On my deathbed, when I'm doing my last live stream, I hope that you can join us.
I really to be the call you're dreading.
Yeah.
Oh no! What does Robbie want now?
He needs me on again. No, is it time? All right, Alex, you've got an upcoming book, All Against All, with artwork by Casper Wingard, lettered by Hassan Otsman-El-Hal. It's from Image Comics. It drops in December. FOC's like in what, the 14th? So it's like in 2 weeks, right?
Well, week and a half now, man. Yeah, we're getting real close. As we say here in the UK. Yeah, as we say here in the UK, it's squeaky bum time.
Squeaky bum time. I like that. We're gonna start using that here in the States now, man. Write that down. Write that down. Squeaky bum. I've gotten to read it. Brian read it. I love it. Holy cow. Like, holy cow, this book is awesome. And obviously, Casper's coming off of Homesick Pilots with Dan Waters, an amazing book. He jumps right into this with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this book, which I think is probably your best work to date, and I think it's going to be your biggest hit.
I appreciate that. Your lips to God's ears. Yeah. So the book, I mean, the sort of the elevator pitch that we're giving everyone is, it's a kind of species flipped alien. So imagine if the xenomorph in Alien was Tarzan. So you've got like a group of aliens who are like running around a ship, and the thing that's kind of jumping out of ducts and pipes and ambushing them and, finding ever more inventive ways to tear them to pieces is a human being.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
That's the idea.
There's a lot more to it than that. But that's kind of the thing that we're kind of hooking people in with, because I think it's something quite evocative. I think everyone could kind of see it when you sort of couch it in those terms. To put more flesh on the bone, the idea is that you've basically got this very advanced spacefaring civilization, and what they tend to do is they have no bodies of their own, right? They're these kind of squid things, and they basically, when they visit other worlds, they harvest them for their best genetic traits, right? And they kind of add them to their own, and they build bodies for themselves. And their civilization's so far down the line now that they don't even think of that as, they don't think of it as kind of barbaric. They don't think of it as theft. They don't think of it as a violation. In the same way that like you or I going to the supermarket, you buy a bag of chicken, like you don't really think where it comes from anymore. So they're kind of at that stage of their development. And what happens is they find Earth many, many thousands of years in the future. We as a species have absolutely trashed the joint because, that's what we did. And they find basically a load of stored embryos and seeds, pardon me, and they don't really know how it all works together. So what they do is they basically take all of these Earth species and just set them running in this artificial habitat, and they don't really know what they have. So they have no idea that like a polar bear shouldn't be in the same habitat as a gorilla. They have no idea that, it's generally like a bad idea, like to keep sort of monitor lizards, you know, next to snakes and all this kind of stuff. They have no idea how it all fits together. And of course, the one thing that they really don't understand is that there are these sort of floppy, useless primates in there that can't really do anything until they're about 4 or 5 years old. And they just assume that they're completely useless. And of course, you know, we know which species that is. And assuming that everything in there is basically mindless, they completely underestimate it. And all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, that's a good description right there. I tell you what, that's a description to really get people into it. The poster we got in the front of our comic shop says, "What if aliens meets the apex predator?" and stuff like that. And yeah, you could see that there's a Tarzan influence and an inversion of that concept. Man, the book is awesome. The book is amazing. I read it this morning 3 times in a row because I was like, wow. I just kept reading it, man. It was so freaking good. And Casper, who I think is one of the best artists in comics today,
100%,
is doing a different, more raw, visceral type style to go along with it. It's not as sleek as like Limbo or Homesick Pilots, but it adds this like visceral energy that really elevates the character. Helpless, I think, or whatever, but like, oh my goodness. Yeah. It's
interesting because I mean we discussed that kind of early on, and he was talking about, I mean, I hope he doesn't mind me kind of saying, but he's taking quite a lot of like impish delight, I would say, in being like unhackable by AI, I guess. Because he just keeps changing up his style, right? And so, but one of the things that he's done with this book is, you know, he's the work he's done so far, which has all been magnificent, but I think he's traditionally associated with being basically quite a clean line artist. And with this, like, he dirties it up, which is not to say that he sacrificed detail or nuance or complexity. Not a bit of it. It's all there. But he's just instead of having this kind of clean line, he's got this quite sort of charcoaly line, and I think it just, yeah, as you say, man, like you nailed it. Like it just, I think it really, if it had been too crisp, I think it would have been too, I think it would have been too sanitized. You know, like we said from the beginning, like, you know, we want to do like a smart book, like an, you know, I mean, I use the term advisedly, but like, you know, elevated science fiction, whatever the hell that means. Not that there's anything wrong with science fiction, but, you know, sci-fi horror or whatever. But just we said, like, I know, you know, we want it to be grody, basically. Like we want there to be like dirt under the fingernails, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even noticed that, and I don't think he did that in Homesick Pilots, but even the panels, there's not really defined borders.
Yeah.
You know, like all the you know, they're all kind of sketchy too, and, you know, like kind of bleed out, and they're not, you know, I think that's a really cool effect. It, you know, lends more to that, you know, the kind of savage nature there too.
He's got a really interesting way of working, you know. I mean, I and by the way, I mean, I say this as a compliment. I think it's fair to say, like, he's obsessive, right? Like, I mean, he obsesses over these details, you know, and it's been very interesting kind of getting into that way of working, because it's been really collaborative in the sense that, like, every choice that I make in the script, he will challenge, and like, not aggressively, not brutally, but just kind of, you know, something that I mean, I'm used to a much more kind of Fordist approach, where even when I'm working, you know, and I've worked with some incredible artists, but generally it's been a case of, you know, they might have needed a little bit of clarification here or there. But whereas with Casper, and we speak most days, right, it'll be, why have you done this? And the thing is that it really kind of keeps you honest as a storyteller, because, you know, you're not getting an easy ride of it, and you're really having to kind of interrogate why you made certain choices beyond what I would, I guess, call not momentism, you know, beyond this would be a cool moment. Like, okay, but does that make sense in terms of the character? Does that make sense? You know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's really cool to get that from Casper, from your collaborator, right? Because it's his work too. It's his book, right? Right.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, you
one
read
other
it. So
thing
what do you think? What do you think about the book, man?
Oh man, I loved it. It's a fantastic first issue. I mean, you know, you're thrown into this place and you're not, you know, like in any story, right? You don't know where you're at and you're just like getting good bits as it's going. And then there's a good satisfying conclusion at the end. But then obviously, you know, the way it's built out is there's more. There's obviously more, and it's exciting to find out what more is going to happen and all that. And one of the bits that I really liked where you mentioned that the alien race is so used to this concept, they don't see any like moral issues, right, with doing all these things. You know, there's a description of how they get their new suits. You know, they just go to a department store and all that, and it just made me think of how it's kind of mirroring our reality too. We're getting pretty desensitized here to so many things, you know, and taking all these things for granted, like the pandemic. You know, probably most people hadn't heard the term supply chain issues, right? It's like all of a sudden I can't get my toilet paper. You know, I mean, but because we get so used to these things just being readily available, and that's, you know, I just thought that was fascinating how, you know, there's a lot of good mirroring, you know, kind of what we're going through now.
Well, I think, like, I mean, I was reminded of like a William Burroughs quote, right? I'm butchering it probably, but, you know, to paraphrase William Burroughs, you know, nobody really wants to know what's on the end of their fork, right?
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of truth in that, and, you know, it's obviously, you know, it's a more kind of expansive statement. You know, nobody really wants to know how the things that get to them. The clothes that we buy, you know, you look at the you look at the made in label, and it's like, okay, you know, how many kids made that, you know? But yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that it was very important for us to make and there was I was sorry to kind of digress, but we had a lot of discussions about how relatable to make the aliens, because the initial discussions we had, right, we had to kind of pivot quite early on, because, you know, I was insistent, and Casper kind of rightly corrected me, right? I was quite insistent that the aliens be alien. So, you know, hopefully when the trade comes out, you know, you'll be able to see a lot of that development in the back matter. But, you know, the one thing that generally I find quite frustrating with depictions of aliens is that they're always quite, you know, generally they've just got like big eyes or whatever. They've just, you know, they've got big eyes or you know, cute mouths or whatever, and they tend to be quite kind of human. So you tend to lose that kind of otherness. But so, you know, you have something like The Thing, where you never really see the thing, right? You only ever see the things that it's kind of absorbed. You know, the xenomorph has no eyes, so there's no kind of identification. But the problem that we ran into, like almost immediately, was, you know, and it gave me weirdly, like, it gave me like a huge newfound respect for like James Cameron or whatever, because, you know, I mean, not that Cameron isn't magnificent anyway, but like with like the Na'vi, you know, yeah, you know, you can make all the kind of Smurfs jokes you want, but the thing is, if you take away that, you know, everyone's got a copy of like Understanding Comics, right? Like Scott McCloud has that, you know, there's that sequence where he says, you know, you draw a circle, two dots and a smile, right? And we are imprinting machines. You know, we can empathize with a circle with 2 dots and a smile, but if you remove those rudimentary tools, you fall into an enormous empathy gap, and it's very difficult to get it back. So, you know, we were having those discussions, and eventually we had to, you know, I didn't want to, but like I there was no way around it. It was like, okay, like they've got to have 2 eyes and a mouth, and they've got to have teeth, and they've got to be able to emote, because if you make them too alien, which is ideal, if you make them too alien, no one's going to relate to them. And the point about this story, just in summary, is I'm asking people to empathize with alien protagonists for 5 issues. The human is the alien, right? That's the scary thing in the dark, and that's the thing that everyone's going to instinctively want to imprint on, right? You're going to want to empathize with the human. So in order to claw that back, we had to like pivot on that design, like almost at the 11th hour. It was like, nah, you know what I mean? Like you can't really kind of like the house always wins. You know what I mean? In the end, it's got to have 2 eyes and a mouth, dude. You know?
it still though is representative of that like emotive quality and bringing the audience into, especially one of the main characters. I guess I would call him the main character in the book. In the first issue, like Casper doesn't use a lot to bring us into this, right? And then in the script, you use a lot through what he's observing and why he's holding back certain aspects of maybe his profession, right? And it does a great job of building me up into, because when I first read the solicitation, I thought this book was going to be from the perspective of this one human surviving in this crazy biodome that with all these other like predators thrown around him, right? And you're showing so much through the actions of the characters as well as the art. So speaking of the art, were you just like lying in wait for Casper to be done with Homesick Pilots so you could pounce on him with this idea? What was the gestation like?
No, not at all, man. Like, I mean, I'll be honest, and this is no disrespect to anybody else, but I couldn't envisage doing it with Casper for various reasons. I mean, one, just to be kind of completely candid, like he's at a level now where I kind of can't afford him, frankly, right? Now we're very good friends, but like at the end of the day, he's got to keep the lights on, right? And that's fine. So he had other offers on the table, and I managed to, by going through the Syzygy imprint, which is Chris Ryle's imprint, I managed to kind of get that kind of squared away. But initially, the way it kind of all shook out was like I was frantically looking around I was looking for an artist, and I was kind of struggling. And so I did what I normally do, which is, I hit up kind of artist friends and just sort of say like, look, is there anyone you're keeping your eye on Instagram or on, Behance or like, DeviantArt? Is there anyone you've seen that you think could kind of pull this off? And like I mentioned it to Kat, just because we talk all the time. And over a course of about a week, it was kind of nuts. It kind of happened really kind of organically. He just kind of kept like sending me sketches. So he was like, oh, what do you mean something like this? I'm like, yeah, you can show that to the artist that you find. And then like the next day we're like, what about this? And then literally like by the end of the week, he was like, God, look, he said, look, if you can fix the financials, like I'll do it, because like I really want to do this. And like I found a way, and then we were kind of off to the races.
Oh wow, that's awesome. And he's coloring it himself, which
man.
I believe that he colored Homesick Pilots as well. And obviously I think, didn't he color Limbo as well, right? So like when go ahead.
But his lighting is very, his like, I mean, if you look at Limbo, there's a lot of you see it a lot now. I think I've heard it referred to like, I don't know if there's like a name for it, but there's this particular blend of blue and purple or blue and pink, but a lighting, and you see it a lot in film. And I can't remember seeing it in comics before Limbo. Like I think Casper kind of, where everything, it's a very kind of like a Miami Vice palette, and like I'd never seen it in comics before then.
Yeah, it's that Argento palette too, right? Like it's the colors, Syria, right? Like the colors I have behind me. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention was we're used to this whole like almost pink and blue kind of thing. By the way, Outkast has a great song called Pink and Blue. Everybody should check that out in honor of Casper. But in this one, he's adding in more like greens than I typically see him using.
Well, this is it. Like the thing is that like that palette now, I think is it's pretty ubiquitous. And so, Casper being Casper was like, well, I guess I'm done with that now. I mean, I've never spoken to him about it explicitly. I don't think it's a conscious thing, but he just changes it up the whole time. And I don't think he can kind of help himself. I think if he, and it's funny, like a lot of people, man, like, and this is not a criticism, people do whatever makes them comfortable, right? But like a lot of people find a niche and they stick with it. But Casper's just restless, he gets bored. Like, I think like he just wants to change it up again. And like the next thing he does with Dan will be completely different. The next thing he does, you know, mainstream wise will be completely different. Like he's truly a chameleon, you know. It's a privilege to work with him. It's like it, you know, it really is. Like he's incredible.
So you're saying that Casper's like the Madonna of the 80s and 90s for the comic book universe, is what you're saying.
Well, they look a lot alike.
Every
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking like that's one of the fascinating things about being a comic book fan is when you have artists like him and or you know like Stuart Immonen is kind of known for not having a specific style, right? It can just he creates whatever style he needs. He feels like he needs for the moment and stuff like that. And it's fascinating as a comic book fan to watch artists do that. You know, I mean it's interesting, isn't it, when you can see when you can kind of see people becoming themselves as well. Like that's always kind of crazy to me. It's like, you know, over the course of Moon Knight, like the, you know, the sort of merch run, like you can see Sienkiewicz like becoming, you know, he starts off and he's like, man, like that dude looks a lot like Neil Adams. And then like over the course like of like 20 issues, like he becomes Sienkiewicz. Like Travis Charest, you remember like Travis Charest, like halfway through that Wildcats run, like he becomes Travis Charest and like does that Wildcat X-Men thing, and like, oh my god, like it looks like a steel engraving. But that's the great thing, isn't it? I think it's the great and the bad thing, I think, about the way the kind of the industry works, is that there's a lot of kind of growing up in public, but like it's amazing when you could see these things like almost happen overnight. It's like, oh man, like someone like, you know, they clearly have some kind of epiphany, and then like comics is so fast moving, like they come back next month and it's like, oh, they've become themselves. Like it's great.
Chris makes a really good comment here about Martin Simmons, who did Friendo, had that very clean plastic like line work and everything, and then Department of Truth is like my nightmares come to life on the page of a comic book, man.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you brought up Sienkiewicz, and that's what kind of I felt like Martin picked up, you know, between Friendo and Department of Truth. Like I feel like he absorbed a bunch of Sienkiewicz as far as informing that style for. I think
that's. I mean, it's in, he was using a different style. Like if you look at a book that he did around the same time called Punk's Not Dead. I think there's. Yeah, like there's I think that it's a lighter book, but I think there's probably a more linear progression between that, from that to Department of Truth, than there is from kind of Friendo. Because with Friendo, like we discussed it earlier on, and I said, like, you know, we agreed like we were going to do it very clean lined, very stripped out, very antiseptic. Which obviously, you know, the problem with kind of fully painted, not the problem, but like, you know, a quality of fully painted work is that there's a warmth to it, right? There's a texture. And like, that's, you know, that's not the world of Friendo, man. Like the world of Friendo is a kind of American Psycho, featureless, like soulless, crushing desert, you know? Yes. So, you know, but yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think, I mean, by the way, I mean, you know, Martin and I are still kind of great friends. Like he did a cover for us. He did one of the variants for
cover looks amazing. He's
man, like
the color palette too into it, man. It looks great.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it looks great. That cover looks amazing. How about Hassan Othman al-Hass? How did you bring him in? He's only one of the best working letterers and supremely like overly working. Like this dude is lettering everything all of a sudden. His lettering is top notch and adds something to it as well. What do you think about his lettering? How did that come across?
Well, I mean, we were lucky, man, because like, I mean, he's really in demand, obviously. And we didn't know if we were going to get him. I mean, I've known Hass for years. I've even done like I did some stuff for his magazine, but he did he hand lettered something that I did with Ian McEwan called Roof Stompers, And like that really, like anyone who's prepared to kind of hand letter in 2021 as was, or 2020 as was.
That's TKO shit, Alex.
Yeah. And it's like, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever worked on. Like Ian McEwan,
that's really good, man.
is astonishing. But Haas hand lettered it, and that just blew me away, right? And like there was a lot of kind of envy about. I think the reason I asked Haas to do that was because I knew that Aditya was going to be hand lettering blue and green, and it just looked so good that I just kind of said to Haas, I was like, would you be prepared to kind of hand letter this? And he said, yeah, okay. So he didn't hand letter this, but one thing he has done, and I think Haas is getting really, really good at this, is it's weird, dude. Like you look at a lot of lettering, I think, from particularly, again, it's like anything when people are starting to use certain tools, but like the advent of like computer lettering sort of in the mid-90s, there was certainly a sense that the lettering sort of sat on top of the art, and it didn't feel like diegetic, right? Whereas one of the things that Haas has done on All Against All, which I think, I mentioned earlier on, right, that, Casper's got a quite sort of broken, almost like a charcoaly style on this, quite rough. And Haas has duplicated those textures on the lettering. So we've got these captions and these dialogue balloons that feel absolutely kind of part of the art, because they have the same quality as the panel borders, they have the same quality as the line work, and so they look absolutely integral to it. You don't have that thing where you've got sort of quite rough line work and then these really clean word balloons. They're absolutely baked in. I mean, some of them are even like they're like half drawn. He's just really painstakingly, and we got things where if you'll have sort of two balloons that are separated by an interval of space, it'll tail behind one of the characters. So it's, do you know what I mean? It's real sort of like deep diegetic lettering.
Yeah. And since the evolution of computerized lettering, the Richard Starking era and all that stuff, you're right, that stuff sits right on top. It looks like
Starkey's is a master. Like I'm not criticizing that stuff a lot. I think it was when people first started using the tools that were available to them. Not Starking's himself, I think, is a genius. I mean, like epoch.
Everybody starts like doing that thing, right? And you're right. It feels like it's like something on top of something else. And we're seeing this with Aditya's work and with Haas's work, where they are becoming more organic and more in the flow of the story. And that's, to me, it harkens back to, like, I think those two are doing the work of Richard Starkings by way of Todd Klein, in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. It's modern tools, but but they're kind of going right back to formula, I think. And also, like, it's not labor saving either. It's using the tools in a scalable way, but absolutely painstaking.
I talk about lettering a lot on the channel, and a lot of people say it's kind of like music and film. If it's done right, you don't notice it. But if you're somebody who's trying to pay attention to that, you do start noticing these things, right? And it is, I'll tell you this, if you don't think it's noticeable, read a comic with terrible lettering. It's noticeable. It is.
It jumps out right away.
It jumps out so bad. It's like wonky. The words are too big for the thing. It doesn't flow right. It doesn't. It's like fighting agains the artwork sometimes. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. A good example of that is the Drew Lay.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say the Drew Lay. He's one of the founders of heavy metal. They translated his works into English, and that's a pretty good example of terrible lettering ruining fantastic 70s sci-fi art. I mean, it's like I mean, you mentioned that. I think you can see it. You can really see it in flipped manga. Yep, that's true.
It's really evident. Like just kind of because obviously you've got the flip, which is one layer of abstraction, and then the translation, which is another layer. And some of that is like super duper noticeable.
That's why as soon as I realized that the Akira box set wasn't just not flipped, but had the original like hand-drawn like sound effects, I had to upgrade. Like I had to, like, not to be a snob about it, but like, come on, y'all, there's a reason why they did it that way, you know? Like there's an effect that lettering is a big part of it, because it's everything together. You know, it's a truly collaborative process. And Alex, you put together a hell of a team on this book. I'll tell you what.
Thank you, man. Sorry, sidebar. Funny you should mention that. I mean, in terms of, I remember because I you know, because like I've got that Akira box set just here, right? And it's lovely to have the kind of the hardcover black and white and everything. And I remember sort of, you know, talking to Ian McEwan actually about this when I was staying with him in Portland. And he was saying, oh, but you absolutely need the epic ones as well if you can get hold of them. Like it'll cost you thousands of dollars, but you need to get the epic one as well. And like I was really taken aback, and I said, "What are you not like a black and white purist?" And he said, "Oh no, absolutely not. Steve Olif's colors are so incredible on the Marvel reprints." But he said, and like I've never forgotten this, and I think there's a lot of truth to this. He said, "You just you partition it in your head. It's a different book, and it's a different book. I mean, I've only read like a few chapters of the epic ones, but it's a completely different reading experience. We
used to have them all at our local library, and some dipshit like checked them out and never returned them. But like that was the first Akira I ever saw. But then when you get into the line work, like the black and white, you're like, man, the color covers all of that up. But it is a different experience, right? It's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Well, and Otomo did direct the colors there. They actually, the last pages that Steve Olif had actually just sold. The original Otomo pages where he gave color guides to Olif to color with.
Whoa!
Those actually just originally, the last bit of them just sold like 3 or 4 months ago. So
did they sell for like tens of dollars?
I didn't even attend that drop because I knew I couldn't afford that.
I think they went pretty high.
But they sold they all sold in like, I think less than 5 minutes or something like that.
But you're not going to get original Otomo work from Akira, right? So this is
that's
like
the only that was really the only way to do it, because the manga they don't release a lot of that original art. I mean, that stuff's just most of that stuff is not out in the wild, so it was pretty rare to see that. But I did look at plenty of the scans, and it was like, that's so cool because it's, I don't know, it's Otomo's colors
just
on that stuff.
Beautiful stuff, man. Like it's I think the Reckless Gallery in Berlin has just had a manga architecture exhibition. So like I bought like a few prints of background cells from Akira, right? And like I've got a rule in my house, and I think it's a good rule, which is I'm not allowed. I'm allowed to have like as much like nerdy junk as I want, like in here. Like this is where I get to have all of my nerdy stuff and my dumb like fly poster and stuff. But like in where in family space, right? Like that's got to be quite conservative and like classical. Like I cannot have a life-size Iron Man armor in the hallway. But those Akira cells, man, they just look like Hopper paintings. So like I got them in, and I was like, so these are going in my office, right? And like my wife was like, oh no, we'll have them downstairs. I was like, great.
Awesome.
I tricked my family.
That's awesome.
That's a fantastic way to do it, though.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
You mentioned a fly poster. I remember last time we were talking, you're a big fan of Cronenberg. We just recently we just finished up Horror Fest, where we do a plethora of horror films throughout the 2 months. And we did Videodrome, which I hadn't revisited, Alex, in probably 10 years. And oh my God, it was the most impactful viewing I'd ever seen. I had to watch it 2 more times within that week. And it gave me vivid, lucid, crazy ass nightmares. But I think that movie's so compelling. I just want to know your thoughts on Videodrome.
I think like it's horrifically prescient, right? I mean it's kind of weird as well, isn't it? Because it's I mean I don't know whether I don't think you guys had the same moral panic that we had over here, but around about the same time that Videodrome came out, was sort of the height of what was called the video nasties
Yeah, the
moral
video
panic
nasties.
over here. Yeah, man. And
Over
like
here,
we had a big thing.
Over here, we just had Siskel and Ebert standing in front of movie theaters trying to tell people not to go watch the latest slasher film. That's what we had. But I know,
Yeah, and all of it, and like the dudes that were making those slasher films like 20 years later are making Spider-Man. It's like it's so stupid. But we had like a big moral panic over Evil Dead. We had a big moral panic over Extro. Like cool movies, man, like real cool movies. But it was so strange to sort of have Videodrome, which is, Cronenberg is certainly at that time was like a product, not of the video system, but certainly like the whole kind of Canadian tax shelter system. And he was making really, Shivers, Rabid, these were not high budget movies, right? I mean, they were still like cerebral, right? But it's so interesting that you've got a horror movie that is kind of making a case for parasitic media, right?
Yeah.
And of course, and I know that I think someone's doing a remake at the moment. I believe
that's terrible.
No. I think I could be wrong. I know there's a Scanners TV. No, I tell a lie. There's a Scanners TV show coming, and I think there's a Dead Ringers TV show coming, which is like gender flipped.
Okay.
Which is a very interesting idea. But yeah, I think like I love Videodrome. I mean, it's the, again, I think the thing that I always get with the with Cronenberg movies, with very few exceptions, is just like I find it just like a sense of like gathering doom that is a very specific mood, and it's such a kind of crazy movie. But I think it's only become kind of more relevant in our sort of like media saturated present, where, I mean, people believe anything that like, Freedom Eagle 476 on YouTube tells them is reality,
Hey, I like that guy. Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, man, like, he's yeah.
I mean, Brian's been in some conversations recently where I've heard somebody literally look at him and be like, do your own research. I saw this YouTube video.
Yeah.
But it happened. Videodrome to me is a prophetic film. Like, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
Like, how in 1983 do you see this connection? Like, you're already seeing this like symbiotic relationship between media and humanity, right? And like, it's so crazy because I was watching the commentary. He was talking about like the reason why James Woods' character's Max is putting on the glasses, because that's technology that affects our perspective, and that's what media does. And like, I don't think many people were keyed into that in 1983, right? I don't know, man.
Like I had a chat with a friend about this. In fact, my good friend Paul Harrison Davies, who did this incredible fly sketch for me.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Isn't it? It's great. But I was talking to him about it, and because there's a lot of this at the moment where people will kind of say like, isn't it crazy how prophetic just seeing some of my other account is Freedom Eagle 476. Tell me the truth. But he was saying, it's kind of almost like a bromide, right? Like it's almost a platitude that like all of these like 80s sci-fi dystopian movies, oh, they were so prophetic. But like another reading of that is that the direction of travel was so screamingly obvious and we were just too dumb to avoid it. Yeah. Like that's also like I'm prepared to like genuinely, like I was saying to a buddy the other day, like so which one was like most accurate? And I think like so which dystopia did we kind of end up with? Because it wasn't like 1984, right? Like it's not that. It's too crazy for 1984. It's too chaotic. And I think like we concluded that it was where we are is sort of we're somewhere in the lens of the Venn diagram between Rollerball, like the amazing Norman Jewison, James Caan Rollerball. We're somewhere between that and RoboCop. Like, like that's ours. Like we're right there.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you have to make sure everybody knows which rollerball you're talking about, not the one with LL Cool J or whatever. Like, so.
Do you know, like I'd say jokingly, like Dan Waters and Casper Wingard, like they have this running joke with me, like because they know that like The Fly is my favorite movie and that I'm borderline obsessive, right? And like they have this running thing with me that like they'll, you know, wherever possible, they will always assert that like The Fly 2 is like by far the superior film. And the way they do that is the way they've got a really simple hack, right? And it drives me crazy. It shouldn't drive me crazy because I'm a grown-ass man. But the simple hack they have is that they always refer to The Fly as Fly 1. It's enough, man. It just drives me nuts. Like,
I think The Fly and The Thing are definitely the best remakes we've ever seen in cinema. Personally, that's me. That's me. All right, 100%. So you have done
Rollerball with LL Cool J
and Rollerball. Since we last talked to you, you've had some Marvel work, you've had some DC work, and I'm sure that's a way different experience. But I remember last time you were here, you said like they're just so efficient, you know, like everything is so sleek and whatnot. But you got a rather high-profile Marvel gig, I think, coming up in 2023 with Red Goblin. You want to speak on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what I can tell you, which isn't much. I apologize, but I mean, there aren't any NDAs, but I have to be sort of a little bit careful. Basically,
so we know that. Right, so it has been announced. We're doing Red Goblin, right?
Yeah, it's been announced. It spins out of an event coming up called Dark Web, and it's going to loosely tie in. I mean, not to the point where you have to read one or the other, but I mean, I would recommend it anyway. But Christopher Cantwell's doing a book called Goblin.
Okay.
And our book is going to it's you know, as I said, you know, they don't have like complementary storylines, but they kind of share a couple characters, so they're loosely in dialogue with each other rather than being, you know, it's not like if you're buying Goblin you have to buy Red Goblin or, you know, whatever. But where our book is, it's basically it's a symbiote book. It's Normie Osborn, who's, you know, the grandson of Norman Osborn. It's basically, people are kind of saying, so like, what is it? Is it like a spider book or is it a symbiote book? And the answer to that question is yes. I mean, we're in a very kind of fortunate position in that because we've got a group of characters who regularly appear like in both strands, you know, whether it be sort of, you know, in Venom or Carnage or Spider-Man, we get to be one of those books that straddles both, and straddles both tonally as well. Because like the thing that Ram and Al are doing, you know, they're building something very cosmic, very philosophically cohesive, very dark. Whereas, you know, the things that, you know, like Zeb and Dan and those guys are doing over in the sort of Spider books is maybe I would say kind of more kind of character focused and sort of much more kind of grounded, and we get to kind of do both. So our book, I mean, I can't say too much, but the way I've sort of articulated it among sort of, you know, my close circle is it's going to be a book about legacy. And I don't mean legacy in a sort of golden agey kind of old timey kind of way. I mean legacy in terms of the thing that you're trying to get away from. Yeah. So that's probably about as far as I can possibly go. But what I will say is, like, I'm writing my heart out on it. I'm working with a Stormbreaker, Jan Basaldua, who is just insanely talented, and they're turning in just absolutely exquisite pages, really kind of kinetic, and it's lot of action, a lot of blood, a lot of feels. But I mean, I think when the announcement kind of came over the wire, right? Like I'm not insensible to the fact that people have certain expectations of this character, and I want to honor them. I want to honor their expectations. But going into this, the challenge that I set myself is like, okay, people have these expectations of this character. Like, it is my mission, even if you have a heart of stone, right? It is my mission to give you a Red Goblin book that is going to make you cry. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm straining every sinew to achieve.
Well, I'm ready for it, Alex. We got a good question from our buddy Eric. Said Friendo felt very inspired by William Gibson. REDFORK inspired by Cronenberg. Does All Against All have any inspiration you point to?
Oh, what an interesting question. Do you know, like, genuinely, I would say I'm reading. Yes, the inspiration is Tarzan, but I'm reading Tarzan kind of against the grain, if that makes sense. I'm not reading it, and this is no disrespect, but it's interesting with everything that's kind of happening to sort of read Tarzan through that prism of nature, nurture, and also colonialism, right? Because the foundational assumption of Tarzan is, if you peel it right back, right? You peel it right back. The idea behind that underpins Tarzan is, if you take the infant child of an English noble family and drop it in the jungle, it will still retain that inherent nobility, right? It will still be a good dude. I think that's bullshit. I think I'm pretty firmly on the side of nurture. So I came at it from, no, I think it'd chew your face off. So that's kind of, but I think it's, I mean, look, I mean, there are certain narratives, colonial narratives particularly, right, that, like, look, as a sort of lower middle class, like, Englishman, I don't have permission to narrate certain experiences, but I can certainly, I think, not safely, because I don't want to write things safely, but I can, if I see hypocrisies, I think it behooves me as a responsible human being to kind of highlight them. And so, without, I'm not being a killjoy, man. Like, I'm not turning around and saying, like, you can't enjoy Tarzan. That's up, Tarzan's, it's great. So it's heaps of fun. But I don't think it's useful culturally for us to assume and presume things like inherent nobility, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, a lot of it, I mean, you could say I'm being kind of, I'm not being kind of mischievous, because, I treat the book kind of very seriously, and I take the book very seriously, but I suppose, I don't have much of an agenda with the book. I mean, I do want to ultimately just tell a good story, a good character-driven story. But there is a kind of an obstinate part of me that, wants to assert that, like, no, we can't take nature for granted. We have to care, and we have to nurture, and if you raise people in terrible environments, they can't be relied, we can't expect them to just transcend, right? Like,
and the flip of that, which means that we can't just go into nature and expect it to bow down to us, right? Because any one of us would go into the jungle, we'd be eaten. like this is the way we'd be eaten. Like, it'd be what happens, man.
Well, but I think there's a lot of that kind of in the book as well. A lot of that is about hubris, right? There's a load of stuff in there about hubris. Like, they think that they are objective and detached, so they're just letting this experiment run. And it's, one of the sort of inevitable effects of sort of just setting all of these ecosystems off against each other is that the whole thing's dying. It's become subject to these, like, entropic processes that are rapidly accelerated. because, you know, there are certain plants that you just can't put in proximity to other plants because they'll choke each other out, and there are animals that you can't put in, you know, so there's no like equilibrium, there's no balance. And the incredible kind of arrogance of assuming that you can just like set these processes running and just, you know, even lay any kind of claim to objectivity, you know, I think is laughable. I mean, with you know, without any kind of humor, but yeah, like laughable. But you see it all the time, right? It's the you know, the anthropologist who kind of walks into, you know, walks into a sort of another part of the world and assumes that they have a kind of depth hermeneutic that will absolutely make sense of everything they're seeing without having any respect for, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the local kind of,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're wrapping this up, y'all. We only have so much time today, but Brian, what you got any final thoughts or questions here, man?
Well, yeah, you know, we spoke the last time, you know, we were, both Robbie and I were, you know, surprised we asked you about, you know, you being a science fiction writer, and you said you thought yourself more of a horror writer. And we were both kind of surprised by that, but I think that made me realize that, because I've never been a big horror fan before that. I didn't hate it. It was just kind of, you know, kind of ambivalent. I like certain things here and there, but I realized through that I actually like horror, especially in comics. It's like, and it's just kind of exploded. And then also we kind of asked about like your current influences. And one of the people you mentioned was that, well, I grabbed the copy of when I got the Ikaro, the Jiro Taniguchi.
Dude, how did you get hold of one of them? That is hard to find.
It was eBay. I was able to get both. And everything. So,
they're also Jiro Taniguchi, man.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and the fact that it was Mobius too, because like just kind of reignited my passion for Mobius. Because I'll send you pictures later, but I actually met Mobius in '88 at a convention when he was doing the Marvel stuff with Epic. You know, they were releasing his stuff in you know, trades and everything like that, and he did a con visit over in Atlanta, and I actually got to meet him, and he did a remark in one of my books. It was just you have an original Mobius, right? Yeah,
is what you're saying.
Yeah. He's beaten all of us, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't know how to match that anymore. And
is that why you're so into original art, like to comic art, like buying original art? Is because like you're trying to chase this Mobius remark?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. And it's a very
you need to watch
expensive...
Videodrome, my friend, about what trying to push that boundary of sensation will do.
I do need to watch that. I'm very intrigued by watching that movie. I mean, intrigued to watch that movie for sure. But I guess it kind of was making me think. You mentioned influences like Tarzan and recent ones, and I've heard from other, you know, creators that it's kind of hard to find time to read comics when you're creating them. Do you find that? And or if not, I mean, is there any kind of other inspirations you're getting from, you know, from the comic book world?
I mean, like I do okay, you know.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I find time to read comics.
Yeah.
No, I think, and this is not kind of bloody mindedness. It's I mean, I have, you know, I get the things that like everyone's reading, so like, you know, Chainsaw Man or whatever, you know, like, you know, everyone reads and loves that stuff. But one thing that I did during lockdown was I kind of I tunneled backwards, right? And again, you know, my friend Paul Harrison Davies, who, as well as being an incredible artist, he's also like, he has this encyclopedic knowledge of like underground and overground comics. And like overground is a very kind of specific, it's a very specific thing. Like, I mean, but these like books like so like one of the things I did was like I tunneled back a lot, right, to find classic books from the 80s and 90s that are never kind of mentioned in the same breath as like Watchmen or Sin City or Love and Rockets, but are nonetheless incredibly formally innovative and incredibly interesting. Some of them haven't even been collected into trades, right? But like because the working theory that I had, and I think it's borne fruit in terms of the kind of ideas that I'm having, is that you guys have heard of the Burgess Shale, right? Like
No,
I think it's like the tar sands somewhere in the tar sands. I think Alberta, but doubtless, your viewers will know better than I do. But basically, there's a place in Canada which this valley that is full of evolutionary dead ends, what I mean by that is not things that were unsuccessful, but things that never. So, like, trilobites with like 4 heads and stuff, just weird stuff, and that never kind of proliferated, but is nonetheless fascinating and beautiful. And so one of the things, and I say dead end like that's a pejorative thing. It's absolutely not. I mean it kind of in a complimentary way, but I thought, like, by following the kind of comics family tree and not going for the obvious, that might sort of trigger some interesting stuff. So I was looking at stuff like Tail Gunner Joe, Thriller, just going back to that, like, really, really good stuff that for some reason, like, is not mentioned in the same breath as like Justice League International or whatever, or like
Justice League International. I love that.
Like,
Alex, you're gonna have to curate a list for us now. You're gonna have to send to us.
More, this is such a good book.
That's a great book. Yes.
I remember that.
Yeah. What an amazing conceit, right? And so that's kind of what I've been doing of late, is as well as kind of keeping up to date with kind of contemporary stuff. Like, I've been trying to be a better comics historian, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. All right. Final question to wrap this all up. First of all, everybody, All Against All drops in December. FOC is like a week and a half away. So let your shop know that you want it right now. Trust me. I've read issue 1. So has Brian. It's got the PCP seal of approval. If Alex tells me I can go ahead with doing an advanced review, I will. Because I just need people to read this book, because it's phenomenal. It's great. Casper's work is elevated. Alex's work is elevated, and Haas's work is elevated. It is what I love about comics. It's holy cows. Like what Dennis and Steppen are doing right now on 20th Century Men. You guys, you guys are stepping up like them. Like Images, and once again, how cool is it that you get to have a book done on the 30th anniversary of Image? That's so cool, man. Like, I
will say, by the way, like, hand to God, right? Just before I sent off the dialogue pass for issue 1, Dennis gave me 20th Century Man issue 1, 20th Century Men issue 1, and I would say I rewrote more than a page's worth on the back of reading that, because it just. Like, not to put too fine a point on it, but like, I was just reading it and I went, it's the new shit. All right, okay, this is the bar.
Yeah.
Right. This is the bar.
We're leveling up again.
So, like,
Rick Beach is one of those creators that has all that work from back in the day that should be as important as Watchmen or at least Justice League International. And I get from 20th Century Men in particular, I get a lot of vibes from the one, but way different, like way more grounded, way more like brutally honest in a way, if that makes sense. So
100%, man. It's so interesting, kind of tracing these. Like, 20th century. I hope he doesn't mind me saying so, but like, that I think is. At the moment is a lot of people have rediscovered this, right? And because the artist editions just dropped out, and also JPL, for God's sake, but it's it's so interesting when these things kind of get rediscovered and it all spins up again, right? And you start getting like, I'm really excited. I mean, and this is nothing to do with my participation. Like, I'm so excited about where comics are going in the next year, because there's a whole group of people coming up, younger than me, but who have got these wildly kind of disparate influences, and I think they have a much more kind of just because of the circumstances in which they grew up, right? They've got a much more mordant kind of sense of humor. And I mean, I know a few of the things that are kind of coming up, and like I'm so excited to kind of see what my kind of what my peers are kind of coming out with in the next 18 months. I think it's going to be it's an extraordinary time, I think, to be a reader.
Nice. All right, and to wrap it all up, Alex, you got 30 seconds. Sell me on Andor and why I should watch it. You should absolutely watch Andor, because you know, even if you don't have any love, even if you don't have any underlying love for Star Wars, it is it's a fantastic exploration of the grinding abjection and mechanism of fascism, and you know, the banality of, as well, the sort of the bureaucratic grind of fascism. I think it speaks to our moment in ways that are truly chilling, and you know, I think it's sort of it's I don't know what to tell you, man. I think it's did you like Rogue One? No.
Oof. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think in that case you might kind of struggle, but it's so. I was saying though, like someone said the other day, and I think there's a lot of truth to this. Like, it is uncompromising and unflinching in its kind of depiction of the mechanism of fascism. But someone said the other day, but like it's all of that, but you've got in the back of your mind that at any moment someone could run into Jar Jar Binks. And you're like, there's a real kind of cognitive dissonance. Like, what this thing really needs is like a goofy little guy. Like, where's the goofy little guy?
Okay, so like I think first of all, you've sold me. I'll check it out as soon as we wrap up here. I'm going to go check out the first episode. I just
no, dude, seriously. Set aside 3 hours of your life, right? It's every you have to watch it in arcs. So you watch 3 episodes and you'll get it. Trust me, man. Watch it in 3 episode blocks and you'll be getting it as intended.
The only reason why I didn't like Rogue One is because the whole time I'm like, so they're all gonna die, right? Like, I don't like. I felt like it was such a, like, out of all the movies, this is what we make, like a movie. Like, I don't know, but maybe I need to go back and rewatch.
But isn't that a beautiful Isn't that a beautiful counterpoint to like episode 4? Where you get the kind of, you know, like the farm boy who does the fluke shot and everyone gets to celebrate and everything. But like the cost of that, like you actually see like the human cost. And Kieran Gillen said, and I agree with this, man, like at the start of like episode 4, yeah, cool. Like Vader's like a scary dude or whatever, you know, but like that climax with Vader in Rogue One, like, I mean, I'll be honest. I was just like, oh, right, I get it. Like, and there's just, oh man, I mean, to anyone who kind of, sorry if you haven't seen it, but just the beautiful thing with, you know, just like passing that kind of precious kind of information from one person to another while this oh god, it's so good, man. It's so good.
Yeah.
I bawled my eyes out, dude.
All right, I'm gonna watch the first 3 episodes of Andor. I'll do that today, and I'll get back to you, Alex. We'll let you know what I think. So
yeah, I mean,
tell you what, if you don't like it, I will Venmo you the money for your dinner. That is how confident I am.
Okay, I like that. I appreciate that, man. That's good. I'll take you up on that if I don't like it. If I feel like my time was wasted, I'll be like, bruh, it's sushi and steak tonight. Okay, Alex? Anyway, Alex, thank you so much for being here. Everybody check out All Against All and everything else that Alex has done. If you've never read Friendo or his Turncoat book or Arcadia. Oh my goodness, I love Arcadia.
Yeah,
He's got a
Arcadia,
lot
but
of
here's REDFORK.
REDFORK, fantastic. Check these books out. Definitely check out All Against All. You can get there ground zero. FOC is a week and a half away. Check it out. Alex, thank you for joining us. We're going to allow you to go back to your life and reading comics and writing them and creating these wonderful stories that we love to talk about. Brian, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Station, pop, pop, boom.